I want to talk about software engineering career progression, and I want to talk about it in the context of actually writing code, or rather, the amount of time that you're going to be spending writing code. Because I think a lot of people get the impression that you're always going to be writing code, the entire time that you're in software development. And I think that, when you start out as an intern, you might get put on a project, you might get some small tickets to work on features or whatever, and you'll probably be writing a lot of code. But honestly, I think it's going to be more trial and error type code, and that can make it feel like it's right. It can make it feel like you're writing a lot of code when you're really not. And I think that as you go from intern to junior developer, I think you're still going to be writing a lot of code, but I think it's going to be moving from, less like trial and error type code that it was in your internship to now working with somebody and actually working on, features or something for whatever product you're making. And that can be a lot of code. And I think that people, when they see software development, they see somebody, sitting at a desk typing away like all day. I think the only spot that's I think going to be the case in your career is probably when you are a junior developer or somewhere around there, because I think that when you start out in software development, when you just get your first job, a lot of things are going to be planned for you, meaning your tickets are probably going to be written for you. Your work is probably going to be, assigned to you. You're going to be giving updates on work that somebody else has created for you to do. So you're not burdened down by a lot of the meetings or a lot of like the administrative management things that come along with different jobs. And so when you enter into this job, it's kind of exciting because you know you can kind of isolate yourself just in whatever thing you're working on. So honestly, take advantage of that time when you have a lot of time to code, because that I think only lasts in that spot. Because once you go from junior developer up to the next spot, that could be software developer two, three, however people rank that. Let's just say you go from a junior developer to software developer two. That transition is largely, I think, going to be met with a little bit, is going to be a shift in some of your priorities and responsibilities. You're still going to be writing code, but I think you're going to be writing a little less code to now accommodate for the fact that you are probably going to be more involved in design, architecture meetings, and decisions. And also, you're probably going to be now or should be responsible for writing some of the work that people do, or the stories that your team picks up. And I think that as you progress into that spot, I feel like if you're not there already, I feel like when you do shift to that, I think you're going to be ready to write less code, to be honest with you. Because I think at that point the excitement is probably going to wear off a little bit in terms of like, writing a lot of code and just doing that all day. So when you get to software developer two, it's writing less code. It's probably a little more meetings and planning and design. But when you make that next jump to senior developer, there's going to be even less coding, and that's been my experience. It's been a lot less coding and a lot more planning and writing tickets for people to work on, and organizing meetings, reaching out to other teams, and then just a lot of research in general. And so I think that really is when you'll start to see, I think, the difference in terms of like what these roles actually do. A senior developer isn't somebody that is a master at coding. It's not somebody that knows every single technology out there. And it's certainly not somebody that is an expert on like, just every topic conceivable. That's not what this role is. This role really, I think, goes from, you know, you have your familiarity with how to write code and how to get features from, in progress to done. This role is adding to that and then saying, okay, you can do all that. Now we have to take that and apply it in a little bit more of like a team, leadership dynamic in terms of, okay, let's take that and then apply it to ticket creation, organizing meetings, and making larger, more impactful decisions about some of the things in your system. And I think that in doing those things, you by necessity have to write less code to accommodate for the time that all that stuff takes. Um, I would be surprised if you were writing the same amount of code as when you're a senior developer as when you were a junior developer. If that's the case, then maybe somebody else is doing a lot of the planning for you, or maybe you are taking too much stuff in each sprint. But I would argue that the higher up you go, the less code you're going to be writing. And then from senior developer, you can go to lead developer, which is even more of that. But then you take a broader responsibility for you have just your scope of ownership and responsibility just increases even more, and it's just again more meetings, more meeting with other teams, and just generally greater responsibility. But again, a little bit less code probably because you're probably going to be advising other people on like coding decisions and things. So senior developer, I wouldn't say is definitely not like an advisory role, but when you become a technical lead, that's when I think you really shift or start to shift into that more advisory role. And the little bit of delegating work that you were doing as a senior developer, you now are going to be doing way more of that as a lead developer. But the thing about it is the unique thing is when you are a senior developer, you can stay there for a long time, but you are going to be you inevitably are going to be faced with two choices. You can go to the lead developer route, or you can go to the management route. And those are two branches that you can pick from, but they end up in very different places. So I think that you have to decide early on which of those branches you want to take. If you want to go the lead developer, you can go from senior lead and then above. It depends on what the company has. But if you go from senior to manager, then you go up the management rank where it's like, maybe you have your manager, your senior manager, your director, your senior director, those kind of things. So it really depends where you're at, but I think that it should be important that you ask yourself this question of which of these branches do I want to take? Because if you choose to go the management route, you're arguably going to be doing like little to no coding at all, and it's going to be a lot of meetings, way more than what you currently have. If you go the lead developer, it's going to be more meetings, but you still are going to be more involved in the code side of things. So I think it's important that you recognize, where, just kind of get a gauge as to where you're at. I feel like it's important that you ask yourself, do I still like to write code? Because sometimes people get to senior developer and they realize they don't like writing code that much anymore. The strange thing about this job is that when you're in your 20s, it's very exciting, and I feel like when you're especially your early 20s, is like you have a lot of enthusiasm for it, and you have a lot of like drive, especially early on when you're just starting out of school. But then, as you get into it, you're either going to continue that enthusiasm and go down the lead developer route, or you're going to realize that the enthusiasm that you once had maybe has not, persisted as long as you may have thought it would. So then you choose to go the management route, which is a different set of work. It's still obviously like you're still going to be making decisions about systems and team and the work that the team takes on and sprints and stuff, but you're not really going to be making pull requests or doing code reviews, at least not in the same way that you were when you were a senior developer on the team. So I think that the distinction between those is there is a large distinction between those two roles, and which branch you decide to take is entirely up to you. And that's I think the one unique part about this job, right? Because when you start out as a junior developer, the next route, the only route you can take is software developer 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it's called your company, and then senior developer. But then when you're there, you have a choice, and the choice is up to you. And I think that that's a really unique part about this job. And I think that it's very it's I like the fact that it's really up to us because let's face it, I mean, you don't know which one you're going to want to take, especially if you're just a junior developer. You don't know, 7 years down the line which one of those you're going to do. I certainly did not years ago, and honestly I still haven't really decided which branch I want to go. Um, and this is it's but I like it about the job. I like that we have a choice about this, because I feel like if we didn't have a choice where it was like we could only go from senior to lead to beyond, we might get burned out thinking about the fact that we have to write code the whole time. Um, but again, that's just me thinking about it. I'm not in that, like I have yet to make that choice, and I feel like when I do make that choice, um, whenever that may be, I feel like I'm going to look back on this time as a very unique and special time, because one, I'm still relatively, I mean, early-ish in my career, but I'm going to remember and look back at the times when I only had to think about coding, uh, in my job, when I only had to think about the one problem that I was focused on. And when I was working on it in the time when I was a junior developer, I definitely I definitely took that for granted. The fact that my focus was really only on one thing generally. Now, as you get higher up, your responsibilities increase, so you kind of lose that ability to stay focused on one thing. Um, so I feel like I'm going to look back on this time as like, especially my early development days, as kind of a special time. And I feel like, in the moment, I didn't see that, but definitely, I think I'm going to think about it a lot more when I am facing that choice of which branch I want to take. Um, and that's not to say that you can't go from lead to manager. Um, but when you are a senior developer, that's typically when you decide if you want to go lead or manager. So it may be different where you work, but this is what I have seen personally and what I've read about, in various books and other things, is that the different routes you can take. And this is like the branching off point here. So I don't know which branch I'm going to take. I definitely like that I have the option. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, so that's kind of the general how this thing kind of works. So hopefully that was helpful. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.